So in this video, what we're going to do is finish solving this problem by translating our plan, our pseudocode, into actual code. This is going to involve doing some debugging, and so I'm going to jump over into Python Tutor. Basically, any time where it's going to be easier to follow the steps in Python Tutor than it is in Replit. This is what I like to do whenever I'm writing code like this. So I'm going to get rid of this pass statement because we're actually going to want our function to run. And then I'm going to tab this over so that it's properly indented. And then I'm just going to start translating. First, I want to create an empty list. So what I want to do is create an empty list. So in Python, to create an empty list, what we're really doing with this list is we're turning this list into this diagram. And so the first index, the second index, the third index should all have like an empty spot for me to just put a true dash or false no dash, right? But for now, we just really need an empty list because we don't know how long or how large we want the list to be. Let's just say found integers is the list. There we go. Now we got our empty list. Now, for every number in the input list, what's the input list? Well, it's integers. The input list is integers. And then instead of every number, we can call it integer. So what I like to do with for loops is the singular in the plural. That helps me keep straight the singular from the plural. All right, so let's start translating this here. Okay, if the number, what did I mean by the number? Well, I meant the integer that we're checking. Integer is smaller than, okay, so how do we do is smaller than? Use the less than sign, 0. And then ignore that number. So I'm just going to sort of do that, right? So now these look more like if statements. I'm going to put a colon here. Let's see. Let's finish translating our if statements. If the integer is larger than, cool, larger than the current length of the list. I'm talking about this list, so I wasn't very specific there. The current length of found integers, so len of found integers. If it's larger than the current length of found integers, then I need to resize the list to be of that length. Then I need to set the value of the place in the list. Let's make sure that I know what list, found integers. Set the value of the place in found integers corresponding with that integer. So with integer, and that's the place in found integers, right? Corresponding with that integer to true. Okay, cool. So I've got a lot of my code done. Now I just have to figure out these two small problems here. Ignore that number. How do we basically say, okay, don't do anything, don't do the rest of the loop, just move on to the next iteration of the loop. In Python, that's the continue keyword. It's like a break statement, but instead of for the whole loop, it's just for this iteration. Now, resize the list to be of that length. Okay, that's a little bit more involved. Let's figure this out. Resize the list to be of that length. The length is the integer, right? So we want the length of found integers, whatever it currently is, to now be whatever the largest integer is. It's going to have a current list. Size, z, extend size. So we want to take the length of found integers into account, right? And we want it to be as long as the integer minus the length of found integers, just in case there's already some stuff in found integers and we found a bigger number later. Okay, so that's the size. Now, how do we actually do the extension? So resize the list to be of that length. So let's say, okay, found integers. And found integers, or any list in Python, has a function on it called extend. And extend allows you to take one array or list and another list and just moosh them together so that they are one list. It actually changes found integers. It doesn't return a new list. So it's not like a lot of functional languages. Lists are mutable in Python, so they can be changed. So what we want to do is extend it by the size. But what extend takes is a list. So what we have to do is generate a list of that size. If you take a list and you put one element in it, let's say false, and then you multiply it by a number, Python will generate a list of that size, a list times that number, right? So yeah, that's how we do that. I'm going to get rid of my diagram here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return found integers, just because even though we haven't found the missing number yet, we just want to make sure that we're able to identify the missing number. And then we'll change our code up. Okay, so now I want to call it and just make sure that it works. So I'm going to pass in, let's say, 1, 2, and 4. So this should return to me 3. All right. Or like, a list with 3 as a false. But instead we get an error, list assignment index out of range. So if you get this problem, you kind of run into this issue. Sometimes it's hard to really know how this got to be, how this happened. And so it helps to just jump into Python Tutor to kind of figure it out and watch it. Let's step through our code. Here's the first missing positive integer. It creates this, it allocates space for the integers list. Then we've got found integers, right? It's an empty list. And now we're going to loop over. We've got integer number 1. Now it's greater than 0, so we're not going to continue. If integer is larger than the length of found integers, now found integers is empty, so its length is 0. An integer is 1, so it's larger. Okay, extend size. We're about to allocate extend size as integer minus the length. So we want to extend it to 1. Cool. Now, found integers, we're going to try to index into the 1th index and set it to true. Here it is. Here's our problem, right? We've got one of those pesky off by 1 errors, which are really common, especially in interviews. So what we've got to do is figure out, where is the problem, right? If we kind of look back at our execution, we just jump to the end here, where that problem is about to be. We can see that what we're about to try to do is index into the 1th element, but we've only extended the size by 1. So there's a couple of things we could do here. We could start by putting 1 number in found integers, but that would not fix our check, right? So we really got to edit this code and let's see. So if integer is 1 and the length of found integers is 0, really what we want to do is make sure that we can get the 1th index. And that's not the 0th element, that's the 1th element, right? So that's different. So if the integer is 1 and the length of found integers is 0, what we really want to do is extend it by 2. So we're just going to add +1 here. Now let's watch that go through and see what happens. Okay, cool. We've got up to about line 10. Now line 10 is where it broke before, and so we made it past that. We've got the 1th index. Great. Time to go up to the top of the loop. Okay, what are we doing now? Okay, so if integer is larger than the length of found integers, so our integer is 2, and is that larger than the length of found integers? It's not. So it's going to try here to not extend the size, right? So what we need to do is make sure that whenever we check this, it actually needs to be 1 larger here. Not 1 larger here, because then this will fire less often. We want this to fire more often and be more sensitive. We want it to compare to the length of it plus 1. We want it to win, and then that extend size to be bigger. So we'll visualize that. And then, okay, now we're at step 25, so we don't break on step 16. So let's go up to about step 14. Okay, we've made extend size larger. We haven't gotten to this point before, so it's already executing differently. So now found integers just got extended again. Perfect. Now we're going to set that to true, and then for integer and integers, Okay, cool, we're gonna extend that to true, and it looks like great. And then we're gonna set 4 to true. All right, and then we're gonna return found integers. So found integers now is giving us this list that goes false, true, true, false, true. So watch the next video to find out how to take this small problem that we've solved and finally finish solving it for the larger problem. Because if we run the tests, what the tests are looking for, if you look at them, is they're not looking for just this thing. What they're looking for is given, and you can read these tests here, self.assert equals, it calls it passes in this test data, and then it expects you to return 2 back. But we'll do that in the next video.